here's the big news, Patrick Klepek. This huge news hit while you were out. This news comes from Variety. Last of Us shocker. Neil Druckmann exits HBO series ahead of season 3. So I'm reading here from the Naughty Dog page. They posted an image that reads as follows. To our Naughty Dog community, we wanted to let you know that studio head Neil Druckmann delivered the following message to our team this morning. Quote, I've made the difficult decision to step away from my creative involvement in The Last of Us on HBO. With work completed on season 2 and before any meaningful work starts on season 3, now is the right time for me to transition my complete focus to Naughty Dog and its future projects, including writing and directing our exciting next game, Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet, along with my responsibilities as studio head and head of creative. Co-creating the show has been a career highlight. It's been an honor to work alongside Craig Mazin to executive produce, direct, and write on the last 2 seasons. I'm deeply thankful for the thoughtful approach and dedication the talented cast and crew took to adapting The Last of Us Part 1 and the continued adaptation of The Last of Us Part 2, end quote. So that's a statement posted by Neil Druckmann. I think in order to really talk about this, we'll probably mention a couple of significant plot developments that happened in Last of Us Part 2 and some stuff that has been hinted for season 3 of The Last of Us. So just FYI, like I don't think we can really have a meaningful conversation without mentioning some of the big things that happened in season 2 of the show and possibly what might happen in season 3. So Patrick Klepek, I really wanted to hear what you had to say about this because Patrick Klepek now sits at the corner of two, covering 2 industries, right? On Decoding TV, you talk about the TV, and on Remap Radio, you talk about video games. And so, my question to Patrick Klepek: do you think this passes the smell test? Right? Like, and when I say that, what I mean is, was this a natural, like, oh hey, there's this other thing I got to work on, and so I got to move to working on this other thing, and there's no creative conflict or ill will or anything. It's just the natural order of events. Does that seem correct to you, Patrick? I have my own thoughts. I'm curious what your reaction is, Patrick Klepek.
There is a world where it is Intergalactic, which is like Naughty Dog has not released a video game since The Last of Us Part 2. Like they make sprawling, cinematic, increasingly they make some of the most expensive video games out there that are not Grand Theft Auto, but like they're up there. These are games that are hundreds of millions of dollars that have to sell so many copies to justify the time and resources put into them. And Intergalactic was just announced last December at the Game Awards. And my understanding, based on the reporting from folks, is that game is not coming out next year, but is coming out the year after. We'll probably close out the PlayStation 5 generation, and in fact, probably straddle the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 6. So where that game is at in development, this is like some of the heaviest stuff. Like you are in what is called full production. Like you are like really building out this game. Like a lot of critical work in what this game becomes happens during this like potential like 2-year period. So there's like a very real world where Neil Druckmann is like often folks who are involved in adaptations are like, they like do a podcast together, interviews, appearances. Like Neil Druckmann was like, he directed episodes. He was writing episodes. It seems like this was not just consulting on an adaptation, but was like a day-to-day participant in the creative process. And so I think there is a world where like it made sense for him to step aside.
Right. It all adds up. Yeah. So,
it would add.
Patrick, is that world you're talking about our world, or
my suspicion, this is not informed by any reporting. Don't anything like that. But it is also deeply convenient as an answer for a deeply criticized season of television, in which sure it still had great ratings, but it seemed to make everybody angry. It made folks who didn't care for Last of Us Part 2 upset. It made folks who loved Last of Us Part 2 also upset, and sets up like in a potentially or likely incredibly divisive, polarizing, and alienating season of television. You could look at this as revealing of like how much power Druckmann potentially had in this, or how much Craig gave to him, and HBO saying like, go work on your game, you'll still be involved, but like we need to sort of hand the reins over to this creative team. And I think there's a world where both things are true, in which Druckmann does need to be more deeply involved day to day with Intergalactic, and also the criticism of this. This is kind of a creative reboot is too strong of a word, but I think it's the closest you could get given the creatives involved to sort of resetting the table. And it makes me wonder, like, should we anticipate a delay? That'll be the real revealing thing, right? Like, if no delay in we don't have a release date, obviously, but like, if we hear rumblings that like, hey, they're pushing back shooting by 6-9 months to quote, what is the term, like retool the scripts or something like that, that would suggest to me where they thought they were headed with season 3 may no longer be exactly where they're headed. And that's going to require a creative rethink of what season 3 is. So what do you think? Is that where you land, or are you in a more cynical town?
I mean, I don't think there's a clear answer is kind of my reaction, right? Which is to say, it's probably a huge combination of things. First of all, I don't think this was planned. Like, because I think if it was planned, they would have started talking about it earlier, is my guess.
It might have been announced at the beginning of the season, where it's like, hey, soften the blow, like Neil's
FYI,
come in.
Like, it's a super natural part of the process. I'm gonna like ease off the show and then like start working on the game.
Stay here till like we kill off Joel. Like, it's one of the biggest decisions he's made as a creative, as a storyteller. Like, I'm going to be here for that moment.
I'll be here for that, and then I'm gonna transition off the show.
Off. Yeah,
but that was not at all hinted at. It was not discussed from my perspective. And so that leads me to believe that this is a potentially like a creative difference, right? Where Craig Mazin, he does his own thing a lot. He's like, writing a lot of his own scripts. And so maybe he's just like, I want to take things in a different direction. Looking back on it, you and I were not huge fans of The Last of Us Part 2, the video game, but say what you will about The Last of Us Part 2, the video game, at least it was an ethos. Do you know what I mean? Like, at least it was really going for it. And I didn't like where it was going, but it was really going for it. And what Last of Us Season 2 did, in my opinion, right, is it sanded down a lot of the edges that made Last of Us Part 2, the video game, so unpleasant. And I think that goes to your point about, like, everyone was unhappy. Like, the people who love the game weren't happy. The people who love the show got something that was really kind of dumbed down, in my opinion. And so I'm really curious. I think that is extremely important context, because I've seen a lot of coverage of this that's saying, "Oh my god, this is a creative apocalypse for HBO." Like, "Oh my, they're losing one of the main guys," and it's like, well, on the one hand, yeah, but on the other hand, like, Last of Us Part 2, the video game, was very divisive. We know that Druckmann was often putting his finger on the scale of wanting things to be similar to the video game whenever it made sense, whenever it's possible. Maybe with Druckmann no longer co-piloting this, they have a chance to really do something very, very different. And that is potentially exciting.
Isn't it too late though? Like,
yeah, I know, right? They already did all the things. They already made a lot of mistakes in season 2, right? Like, so yeah, I don't know, man.
Like, this would have been more interesting if it had happened.
Yeah, a year ago, right?
It also would have given us a better sense of like what is the dynamic between these two, like where are the scales like being pressed. Now I think it'll be very challenging to understand, like, if season 3 is seen as a cleanup, like, well, is this just a reaction to the you know what I mean? Like, it'll be very difficult to parse exactly what it all happens. Maybe it's for the positive, maybe it's for the negative. Like, it's really hard to say until we actually get a glimpse of what that season is and their plans for it. But I will say that's why I said it's convenient, but I don't think there aren't there again. Like, I think I'm with you. Would have made more sense if it happened at the beginning of the season, which leads me to believe there was credence to both theories. Yes,
right.
I think Sony might be like, "Hey, Bucko, like
we're not paying you all this money to not work on our game." Like,
well, and yet, The Last of Us was also like, people need to understand is there are very few sort of auteur is one word, but like names in video games, right? There's Hideo Kojima, Neil Druckmann is one of them. There are really a hand. Shigeru Miyamoto, I really don't even think qualifies. I don't know that he rises like Mario does, but does the creator? There are very few folks like people could name, like that make video games. Druckmann is one of them. And part of what Sony is a company, and importantly, you may think Sony does a lot of things, and they do, but the driving engine of Sony as a corporation is PlayStation, because their strategy now as a company is transmedia, which is to say they make video games that become many other things.
Yeah.
And then the movies feed into the video games. Like, they are trying to create a cycle where how do you handle escalating budgets and like increasing labor costs? It's like, don't reinvent the wheel. Like, that's why we have a Twisted Metal show. That's why we have a Last of Us show. And so for Sony, like, you need Intergalactic to be a hit video game so it can also be a hit television show or a movie. And so Sony has some competing interests here. And I think you could also look at it as like, well, Craig seems like a pretty steady like person to hand the ship to, right? Like, Chernobyl was incredible. Like, clearly he got along, understands the source material. And so you can look at it that way, where it's like, well, if we do need to hand this off and put Neil back in charge of day-to-day on Intergalactic, we've got a good creative in part. And also we need to set up, if there's no Last of Us Part 3, what is HBO adapting next? Like, maybe it's Intergalactic in 3 years.
Yeah. So I guess it all worked out timing wise, right? But
I'll say I've never been more excited for Last of Us season 3. And I was not particularly excited about Last of Us season 3 at the end of season 2, but I'm at least more interested now. Makes me fascinated to see the process.
What has been said is that season 3 is going to mirror the video game in the sense that it will be about Abby's story, which is another character in The Last of Us, right? A character that's not the two main leads that we were introduced to in the first season. That has been spoken, and I'm curious if they're going to stick to it. Like, now they have the opportunity to do something completely different. It's when the guy who you're making the thing with and who has a really specific idea of how the story should go is no longer working on it, it does free you up to do potentially other things. So that is, again, very exciting. However, I'm not that excited because the changes that were made in season 2 were not the greatest overall. Some of them weren't. Some of them were. Anyway, I don't know. This is kind of how I'm reflecting on it after all is said and done. I guess my ultimate assessment is, feels like it's probably the best move for everyone involved. So like, no shade at the actual decision making here, but also doesn't feel like it was super planned for or even necessarily what Druckmann would have wanted. Because or like, let me put it this way. I think if Druckmann really wanted to do it, which my guess is he did, and Craig Mazin and HBO also wanted him to do it, my gut feeling is they would have worked something out. They would have been like, all right, every other Sunday you're working on scripts for The Last of Us. And you know what I mean? Like, my guess is they would have worked something out, and it's just like, this just makes more sense for everyone for us to part ways. So we'll see what happens. And I agree with you, like, seeing if there's a delay for The Last of Us is going to be a big step. But I mean, at this point, we're probably not going to see a season 3 of The Last of Us until 2027, right? And so if you push longer than that, people might be like, Abby who? At that point.
I think they might already be there, David, is the problem.
Yeah, indeed.
Pedro, like, how much, what kind of Brinks truck do we got to back up to get you to be? Can we push? He's going to be in the trailer. Like, there's not a chance that he's not. Like, I know he did his big goodbye on set, but I'm sorry, brother. But like, you're going to get a big old check to come back for at least an episode.
Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.